The peaceful world of Caelin had always been a place of beauty and harmony. The green forests stretched for miles, the ocean sparkled under the sun, and the cities were filled with people who lived in peace. The people of Caelin had always believed in kindness and cooperation, never imagining that their world could be threatened. The royal family, led by Queen Illyra, had ruled for centuries, guiding the planet with wisdom and care. But now, danger had come to Caelin. It was much worse than anyone could have ever imagined. Princess Liara, the youngest daughter of Queen Illyra, was known throughout the galaxy for her intelligence and beauty. With long silver hair and emerald eyes that sparkled like stars, she was admired by many. But Liara was not just a pretty face. She was also a skilled diplomat, learning from her mother to lead with kindness and strength. She had always dreamed of visiting other planets, to see the universe beyond Caelin and learn about other cultures. However, her peaceful life was about to change forever. It all started one quiet evening. Liara had been attending a royal meeting when she noticed something strange outside the palace. The sky was darkening quickly, and strange shadows moved across the land. At first, she thought it was a storm, but then she realized something was terribly wrong. Ships that looked like no others she had ever seen filled the sky. The ships were large, dark, and menacing, with strange markings she did not recognize. Lyra's heart raced as she ran toward the royal chambers, only to find her mother, Queen Illyra, preparing to meet with a group of ambassadors before she could say a word. The palace alarms sounded and soldiers rushed to the front gates. "We are under attack," one of the soldiers shouted. "The enemy comes from another galaxy." Liara stood frozen, her thoughts spinning. The people of Caelin had never faced such a threat. The royal family had always been respected throughout the galaxy, and no one had dared to harm them. But now, an unknown enemy was attacking her world. The ships outside began to land, and armed men in dark uniforms marched through the gates. "Princess!" a voice cried out, pulling Liara from her thoughts. It was her personal guard, Captain Yalin. He was a strong and trusted warrior, but even his face showed fear as he hurried to her side. "We must leave, Your Highness. This place is no longer safe." Liara nodded, but before she could move, the doors to the chamber burst open, and armed men flooded inside. They were not from any known galaxy. Their faces were covered, and their weapons were unlike anything Liara had ever seen. The soldiers moved quickly, and in a flash they surrounded her, forcing her to the ground. "Take her," one of the attackers commanded. "The warlord wants her alive." Captain Yalin fought back, but he was outnumbered. Liara tried to resist, but it was no use. The attackers were too powerful, and before she knew it, she was being dragged through the palace halls and out into the streets. She could hear the chaos outside, the sounds of fighting, the cries of her people, and the distant roar of explosions as they pulled her away. Liara caught a glimpse of her mother standing in the doorway, watching helplessly. The queen's face was filled with sorrow, but she gave her daughter a single nod. It was a silent message. "Stay strong." Liara swallowed her fear and looked up at the night sky. She didn't know where they were taking her, but she knew that if she was to survive, she had to keep her wits about her. Hours passed, and Liara was thrown into a dark, cold cell. Her hands were bound, and the walls were made of a strange metal, a substance that she could not recognize. There were no windows, no way to see the stars. She sat in silence, her mind racing. Who were these people? Why had they attacked Caelin? Most importantly, what did they want with her? She thought of her mother and her people, wondering if anyone had survived. The thought made her heart ache. She could not fail them. She could not let them destroy her world without a fight. Suddenly, a soft beep echoed in the room. Liara looked around, startled. A small, round device on the wall blinked red, then green. She knew immediately what it was. It was a distress bacuna. Way to send a signal for help. With shaking hands, she reached out and pressed the button. "Help," she whispered into the device. "Please, someone, help me." She didn't know who would receive the message, or if anyone would come. She didn't even know if her mother had survived the attack. But in that moment, Liara knew she had to try. She had to reach out to anyone who might help, anyone who could save her world. The princess closed her eyes, praying that someone would hear her cry. She didn't know who would come to her aid, but she hoped with all her heart that they would. On Earth, life had continued as usual. People went about their daily routines, working, studying, and living in peace. The galaxy was vast, and humanity had only recently begun to explore its outer reaches. Most humans believed that their world was small in the grand scheme of the universe. They were aware of aliens, of course, but had little reason to worry about their own place among the stars. Humanity had never been involved in any major galactic conflicts, and many believed it would remain that way. But that was about to change. In a hidden facility on Earth, a group of military personnel sat in a dark room, studying various pieces of alien technology. These soldiers were part of a secret unit, one that had been established years before, but whose existence was unknown to most people on Earth. They were the best of the best, trained for the most dangerous and unpredictable situations. They were a force prepared for the unknown, ready to protect their world from any threats that might arise. Their leader was Captain Mark Hughes, a man known for his calm demeanor, sharp mind, and his ability to think on his feet. Captain Hughes was sitting in his office, reviewing reports, when a soft ping interrupted the quiet. A message had come through. At first, it appeared to be a routine communication, but as he read the message, his heart began to race. The message wasn't from any known alien species. It was a distress signal, originating from a distant galaxy, one that had never had any contact with Earth. It was a cry for help. Sent from a planet called Kalin, the message had been encoded in a way that made it clear it was not a random transmission. The request for help was urgent, and it mentioned a Princess Liara, who had been taken captive. The warlord behind the attack was unknown, but it was clear from the tone of the message that Liara's life was in immediate danger. The distress signal mentioned a powerful force, one that had destroyed the peaceful world of Kalin, and it called for aid in the form of a rescue. Captain Hughes stood up, pacing across the room. His mind raced as he considered the implications of this message. He had seen many strange things during his career, but this was unlike anything he had ever encountered. He had heard rumors of alien species and galactic conflicts, but Earth had always stayed out of such matters. Now, a world was in crisis, and Earth's response would be critical. He reached for a button on his desk, activating a secure channel to the headquarters of the secret military unit. Moments later, his top officers appeared on the screen. "Captain," one of them said. "What's going on?" "I've just received a distress signal from an alien world," Captain Hughes replied, his voice steady but filled with urgency. "They need our help. Princess has been captured, and the entire planet is in danger. We're going to have to act fast, eh?" The officers exchanged glances, their expressions serious. They had been prepared for many things, but this was new. No one had expected Earth to be pulled into the affairs of the galaxy so soon. "Do we know what we're dealing with?" another officer asked. "We don't have much information," Hughes said, "but the signal came from a planet called Kalin. The Princess Liara is their royal heir. She's the daughter of Queen Elira. If we don't act, she could be lost, and Kalin may fall into the hands of the enemy. I'm going to assemble a team and get us to Kalin as quickly as possible." The officers nodded, and within moments the team was ready. The soldiers gathered in the briefing room, each one focused and determined. They were Earth's best, and they knew what was at stake. The mission was simple: rescue Princess Liara, defeat the enemy, and protect the planet. As they boarded the Falcon, their state-of-the-art warship, Captain Hughes looked over his team. They were all equipped with advanced technology, trained for the most dangerous missions. They had the best weapons, the best armor, and the best training. With all that, this mission was different. They were venturing into the unknown, to a galaxy filled with alien civilizations. The Falcon was a sleek, powerful ship, capable of traveling vast distances in the blink of an eye. As it lifted off from Earth's surface, the soldiers sat in silence, each one reflecting on the mission ahead. The unknown awaited them, but they were not afraid. They had been trained for this moment, and they were ready as the ship entered hyperspace. Captain Hughes sat back in his chair. He glanced out of the viewport, watching the stars streak by. They were heading toward a planet none of them had ever seen before, a world in crisis. They didn't know what awaited them on Kalin, but they knew one thing for sure. They would do whatever it took to save the princess. Humanity had been seen as weak, as insignificant by the galaxy's more powerful species. But Captain Hughes knew better. The soldiers aboard the Falcon were not ordinary humans. They were warriors. And they were about to show the galaxy just what humanity was capable of. The Falcon soared through the vastness of space, its engines humming steadily as it traveled toward Kalin. Inside the ship, the human soldiers sat in silence, each lost in their thoughts. The mission ahead was dangerous and unknown, but they had trained for moments like this. The crew knew they were embarking on something bigger than just a simple rescue operation. They were stepping into the heart of an intergalactic conflict. They were Earth's last hope for saving a world, and its royal princess. Captain Mark Hughes paced back and forth in the command room, his thoughts heavy with the responsibility that rested on his shoulders. He had led many missions before, but none like this. The fate of an entire planet was in their hands, and they were up against an enemy they knew nothing about. "Captain, we're entering the outer atmosphere of Kalin," said Lieutenant Maria Diaz, the ship's navigation officer. Her voice was calm, but there was a hint of tension in it. The team had no idea what to expect once they arrived. Hughes nodded, his expression serious. "Understood. Prepare for descent, Lieutenant. Everyone, get ready. We don't know what's waiting for us down there, but we'll be ready for it." The soldiers strapped themselves into their seats, checking their weapons and equipment. Each one had been trained for different roles: snipers, medics, engineers, and soldiers. Together, they formed a well-coordinated team, ready to face whatever challenges Kalin had in store for them. As the Falcon descended into Kalin's atmosphere, the planet's surface came into view. The land was beautiful, with wide oceans and lush green forests that stretched as far as the eye could see. It's the royal palace, where Princess Liara had been taken. Stood in the heart of the capital city, surrounded by high walls and guarded by forces unknown. It looked like a peaceful place from the sky, but Hughes knew better. A battle was coming, and Kalin's peaceful appearance was about to be shattered. "Hold steady," Hughes instructed, as the ship began to land. He could see the distant columns of smoke rising from the city below, a clear sign that something was terribly wrong. "We'll touch down just outside the city. Stay sharp. Need to move quickly." The Falcon landed with a soft thud on the ground, its massive engines kicking up dust and debris. The soldiers disembarked quickly, moving in a well-organized formation. They were on Kalin now, and the mission had just begun. "Captain, we have incoming," Sergeant Liam Brooks, the team's scout, said as he looked through his binoculars. "There's movement in the city. We're not alone." Hughes gave a sharp nod. "It's no surprise. The Warlord's forces will be expecting us. Let's make sure they regret underestimating Earth." The team moved swiftly through the dense jungle, their boots making soft thuds as they navigated the uneven terrain. The soldiers used hand signals to communicate, their faces grim but focused. They couldn't afford to waste any time. Every second counted. As they approached the edge of the forest, they saw the faint outline of the city in the distance. "We need to move faster," Hughes said, his voice low. "There's no telling how much longer Liara has." As they neared the city, the soldiers saw the first signs of enemy forces, alien soldiers in dark armor, patrolling the streets. They were well-equipped, their weapons gleaming in the dim light of the planet's twin suns. But the human soldiers were no strangers to danger. They had faced worse enemies, and they had learned to adapt quickly. Target in sight. Sergeant Brooks whispered as he raised his sniper rifle. "I've got a clear shot." Hughes held up his hand to stop him. "Not yet. We need to take them by surprise. We'll move in quickly and quietly." The team spread out, using the shadows of the trees and buildings to conceal their movements. They had the advantage of surprise, and Hughes wasn't going to waste it. The soldiers advanced, moving through the streets with precision and speed. They worked as a unit, each member covering the other as they approached their target. As they neared the palace, the enemy forces grew stronger. It was clear that the warlord was expecting an attack, and he had reinforced his defenses. But the human soldiers didn't hesitate. They had one goal: rescue Princess Liara and get out before the enemy could mount a counterattack. "Captain, we've reached the outer wall of the palace," Lieutenant Diaz reported. "There's no turning back now," Hughes nodded, his gaze fixed on the high walls of the palace. "We've come too far to back down. Let's make sure Liara gets out of here safe. Move in." The soldiers moved quickly, scaling the walls with their advanced climbing equipment. As they reached the top, they paused, surveying the courtyard below. The palace was heavily guarded, but the soldiers had trained for this. They knew how to get in, and they knew how to fight. "We're in position," Lieutenant Diaz said. "On your command, Captain." Hughes took a deep breath. This was at the moment they had been waiting for. The fate of Princess Liara, and possibly the entire planet, was in their hands. "On my mark," Hughes ordered. "Let's go." The team dropped into the courtyard, weapons drawn. The fight for Kaelin had begun. The courtyard of the royal palace was a silent battlefield. With the faint hum of the soldiers' movements and the occasional clang of metal ringing through the air, the human soldiers had dropped in from above. Landing on the soft grass without a sound, they were in enemy territory now, and every step they took could be their last. Their goal was clear: rescue Princess Liara from her captors and escape with her safely. Captain Hughes led his team forward, moving with quiet precision. They were all well-trained, used to working as one, and they knew that this mission would be their most important one yet. They were not just fighting for the princess. This battle would determine the future of Kaelin. The palace was surrounded by tall stone walls, and the entrance was guarded heavily. Alien soldiers stood on patrol, their weapons ready, their eyes scanning the area for any sign of trouble. But the human soldiers were good at staying out of sight. They knew how to use the shadows to their advantage. Sergeant Brooks, the team's scout, crouched low behind a stone pillar, his eyes trained on the guards ahead. "We've got a clear path to the entrance, Captain," he whispered into his communicator. "There are 4 guards up ahead. I can take 2 of them out with my rifle." Hughes looked at his team, making quick decisions. "Not yet. We need to move closer, get into position first. We don't want to alert the whole palace just yet." The soldiers nodded in agreement, their faces serious but determined. They began to move silently, their boots making no sound as they glided across the grass. They were close now, just a few yards from the entrance. Hughes motioned for them to stop and took a knee, his eyes scanning the surroundings. "We move." "In on my mark," he whispered. "Get ready." The seconds felt like hours, but finally Hughes gave the signal. Now, in an instant, the soldiers sprang into action. Sergeant Brooks took out the first 2 guards with his sniper rifle. Their bodies falling to the ground without a sound. The rest of the team charged forward, weapons raised, moved quickly, subduing the remaining guards before they could raise the alarm. Within moments, the entrance was clear. "Move, move, move," Hughes barked as he led the way inside. They were in the palace now, and the real battle had begun. The hallways were dimly lit, but the soldiers had night vision goggles that allowed them to see clearly. They moved quickly, their footsteps silent on the marble floors. The palace was beautiful, with high ceilings and ornate walls, but all the soldiers could focus on was the mission at hand. The princess was somewhere inside, and they needed to find her before the enemy realized they were there. "Captain, I found a room up ahead," Lieutenant Diaz said, her voice steady, but filled with urgency. "There's a lot of activity in there. Could be where they're holding the princess." "Good," Hughes replied. "Let's go." They moved toward the room, careful not to make a sound. As they reached the door, Hughes signaled for them to stop. He listened carefully, hearing muffled voices on the other side. The sound of footsteps echoed down the hallway. Hughes looked at his team. "We go in fast, subdue anyone inside, get the princess, and get out." With the plan in place, they kicked open the door, storming into the room with weapons raised. Inside, they found 2 alien soldiers standing guard. They were surprised by the sudden intrusion, but the human soldiers were faster. In seconds, The guards were on the ground, unconscious. Hughes scanned the room, sitting on a metal chair. Her hands bound was Princess Liara. Her silver hair was tangled. She looked exhausted, but her eyes sparkled with defiance. When she saw the soldiers, a flicker of hope appeared in her gaze. "Princess Liara," Captain Hughes said, his voice calm. "We're here to get you out of here." The princess didn't speak at first, but the relief on her face was clear. She had been trapped for so long, and now help had arrived. She nodded, her voice weak but steady. "Thank you. I didn't think anyone would come for me." Hughes quickly moved to her side, cutting the ropes that bound her hands. "Where? Not leaving without you?" he said firmly. "Let's go. Need to move fast." As Liara stood up, she winced, still recovering from her captivity. But her determination was clear. She had been through so much, yet she refused to show any fear in front of these human soldiers. They were her only hope now, and she wasn't about to waste it. Just as they turned to leave, the sound of footsteps echoed from the hallway. More guards were coming. The soldiers had been too loud, and now the warlord's forces were closing in. "Captain, they're coming!" Lieutenant Diaz shouted. "Have to move now. We don't have time to waste," Hughes said, grabbing Lyra's arm and pulling her toward the exit. The guards were closing in, but the soldiers were ready. They had trained for this kind of fight. As they reached the entrance, the soldiers heard the unmistakable sound of engines. The warlord's reinforcements were arriving, and the battle for the princess was far from over. "We need to get to the Falcon now," Hughes shouted, his voice filled with urgency. "Let's go." They ran for their lives, knowing that if they didn't move quickly, they might not get out alive. But they were human, and they weren't going down without a fight. The escape from the palace had been close, too close. As Captain Hughes and his team raced through the corridors, the sounds of enemy soldiers chasing them grew louder. The human soldiers had rescued Princess Liara, but now their true test had begun. They were deep inside enemy territory, and their only hope of survival was reaching the Falcon, the warship waiting for them just outside the city walls. "We need to move faster," Sergeant Brooks shouted, leading the way as he checked his weapons. The team ran at full speed, hearts pounding in their chests. Every second counted. The enemy would not give up easily, and they couldn't afford to be caught. Princess Liara stumbled slightly behind them, still weak from her captivity. But her will to survive burned brightly. She had spent days in that dark cell, and now with the help of these human soldiers, she was free. She couldn't let them down now. "We're almost there," Lieutenant Diaz called out, looking ahead. "The Falcon is just beyond that building." Rounded a corner, only to be met with a wall of alien soldiers. The enemy had anticipated their escape and was waiting for them. The soldiers in dark armor raised their weapons, prepared to fight. "This is it," Captain Hughes said, his voice steady but filled with urgency. "Get ready to fight." The soldiers readied their weapons, and the battle began. The first shots rang out as Sergeant Brooks fired his sniper rifle, taking out 2 of the alien soldiers in quick succession. Each soldier worked with precision, taking down the enemy one by one. Captain Hughes led the charge. His team followed his lead, moving quickly and efficiently, as if they had practiced this 1,000 times. Every soldier knew their role, and they trusted each other to cover their backs. "Keep moving," Hughes shouted as he ducked behind a column for cover. The soldiers fired at the advancing enemy, slowly pushing them back. They had to reach the Falcon. It was their only way out. Princess Liara, though weak, fought alongside them. She had been trained as a leader and had learned to defend herself from a young age. The soldiers were impressed by her courage as she used a blaster to take out one of the alien soldiers who had tried to approach them. She wasn't just the Princess of Kellen, she was a warrior in her own right. The battle was fierce, but the human soldiers were unstoppable. Slowly but surely, they pushed the enemy back, making their way through the city toward the landing site. "There it is," Lieutenant Diaz called out, pointing ahead. The Falcon was just within sight, but the path to it was still blocked by several groups of enemy soldiers. Time was running out. "We need to make a run for it," Hughes said, his eyes scanning the area, cover us." The soldiers quickly formed a defensive line, covering each other as they sprinted toward the Falcon. The enemy tried to follow, but the human soldiers were faster. They reached the ship's landing bay just as the last of the enemy soldiers were closing in. "Get inside," Hughes ordered, as he fired one last shot at the enemy. He quickly followed his team into the ship, making sure the princess was safe before sealing the door. The Falcon's engines roared to life as the crew took their seats. Lieutenant Diaz worked quickly, bringing the ship's systems online. Soldiers took their positions, ready for takeoff. As the ship lifted off the ground, Hughes breathed a sigh of relief. They had made it. For now, they were safe. But the battle wasn't over yet. The warlords' forces were still after them. They would need to fight their way through the galaxy to keep Liara safe. "We've got company," Sergeant Brooks said as he looked out of the viewport. "Several enemy ships are following us." "Prepare for combat," Hughes said, his voice calm but firm. The soldiers knew what had to be done. They had just rescued the princess, felt the ship shake as enemy fire struck their hull. Diaz quickly brought the ship into evasive maneuvers, narrowly avoiding another blast. The warlords' forces were determined, but the human soldiers were prepared. "Return fire," Hughes ordered. The ship's weapons systems activated, and the soldiers fired back. The battle above Kalen was just beginning. Princess Liara sat quietly in the cockpit, watching the battle unfold. She could hardly believe what was happening. Just hours ago, she had been trapped in the palace, at the mercy of the enemy.
Ow.
Thanks to these brave human soldiers, she was free. "Thank you," she whispered to Hughes, her voice filled with gratitude. "I don't know how to repay you for saving my life." Hughes gave her a small smile, though his eyes remained focused on the battle outside. "You don't have to. We're here to protect you. That's what we do." Liara looked out of the viewport at her planet below, her heart heavy. Ellen had been attacked, and the galaxy would never be the same. But as long as there was hope, as long as she was alive, there was a chance for peace. And she knew that with the humans by her side, they could rebuild. As the Falcon made its way into deep space, the team prepared for the next challenge. They had rescued the princess, but the warlords' forces would not stop. The soldiers knew that this was just the beginning of a much larger battle, one that would test their strength, their loyalty, and their courage. But for now, they had done their job. They had saved the princess. And that was enough. The stars stretched endlessly ahead as the Falcon sped away from Kalen. Captain Hughes and his team were safely aboard, but the battle was far from over. As the Falcon navigated the vastness of the galaxy, the soldiers knew that danger was never far behind. Inside the ship, the mood was tense but determined. The human soldiers sat in their seats, preparing for whatever might come next. The princess, now safe, had retreated to a quieter corner of the ship. She sat silently, her thoughts heavy. She had escaped the palace, but her planet, her home, was still under attack. There was no time to relax. The Falcon was designed for speed and agility, but it was still vulnerable to the powerful weapons of the warlord's fleet. We knew that they couldn't outrun the enemy forever. Urgency. "We can't keep running. They'll catch us if we don't make a stand." Lieutenant Diaz, the ship's pilot, nodded. She was focused, her eyes glued to the controls. "I can't shake them off just yet, Captain, but I'm going to try something." "Do whatever you have to do," Hughes said. "We're not just saving the princess anymore. We're fighting for the future of Kalen. We can't let them win." The ship's engines roared as she pushed the Falcon into a series of sharp turns, trying to throw off the pursuing enemy ships. The Falcon was faster, but the enemy had the numbers, and it wouldn't be long before they surrounded the ship. "Captain," Sergeant Brooks shouted from the back of the room. "We've got incoming fire. They're getting closer." Hughes didn't hesitate. "Prepare for battle. Get to your stations, everyone." The soldiers jumped into action. Sergeant Brooks, Lieutenant Diaz, and the rest of the crew took their positions. The Falcon was equipped with the best weapons humanity had to offer, and the soldiers were ready to use them. But even with all their advanced technology, they were facing a tough enemy, one that wouldn't back down easily. As the enemy ships drew closer, the battle began. The Falcon fired its weapons, sending blasts of energy into the blackness of Tesa. Space. The enemy ships retaliated, their lasers flashing as they tried to strike the human warship. The space around them was filled with the sounds of combat, the flashes of explosions lighting up the darkness. Inside the ship, Sergeant Brooks aimed the ship's heavy weapons, firing at the approaching enemy ships. Lieutenant Diaz expertly maneuvered the Falcon, dodging incoming fire and returning blasts with precision. It was a deadly dance, and every moment counted. Princess Liara watched the battle from the observation deck, her heart pounding. She had never imagined that humans could fight like this. They were strong, focused, and determined. These soldiers weren't just fighting for her. They were fighting for the freedom of her people. For the first time in days, she felt hope rising in her chest. "Captain, we've taken some damage," Lieutenant Diaz called out, her voice tight with concern. "Oh, shields are holding for now, but we can't keep this up much longer. We need a plan now," Hughes said, his eyes scanning the ship's readouts. The Falcon was holding strong, but every shot from the enemy was taking its toll. They couldn't afford to keep trading blows with the warlord's fleet. They needed to outsmart them. "I have an idea," Sergeant Brooks said, his voice calm even in the heat of battle. "There's an asteroid field up ahead. If we go through it, we might be able to lose them. The Falcon is fast enough to navigate it, but it'll be risky." Hughes didn't hesitate. "Do it. Take us through the field." Lieutenant Diaz slammed her hand on the control panel, and the Falcon veered toward the asteroid field. The ship's engines roared as it sped toward the massive rocks floating in space. The asteroid field was dense, filled with huge rocks that could tear a ship apart if they weren't careful. "Hold on," Diaz shouted as the ship plunged into the field. The Falcon swerved and darted between the asteroids, narrowly avoiding collision with the massive rocks. The ship shook violently as it made sharp turns, but Diaz kept her focus, guiding the ship through the dangerous maze. Behind them, the enemy ships followed, not willing to lose their target. But the human soldiers had the advantage. The Falcon. It was more agile, more precise. The enemy ships struggled to keep up, their weapons firing wildly as they tried to navigate the asteroid field. "We're gaining on them," Sergeant Brooks called out, his voice full of excitement. "They can't keep up." Hughes watched as the enemy ships slowly fell behind, their pursuit faltering as they collided with the larger asteroids. The Falcon was a few seconds ahead. Now, and with each passing moment, the distance between them grew. "We did it," Diaz said, breathing a sigh of relief. "We're free," but Hughes didn't relax just yet. "We've won this battle, but the war isn't over. The warlord will come for us again, and next time he'll be ready." Princess Liara stood up from her seat, walking toward the crew. She could feel the weight of the situation pressing on her. Her planet had been attacked, and she didn't know what the future held for Kalen. But she knew one thing. With the help of these brave soldiers, her people had a chance. "Thank you," she said, her voice filled with gratitude. "You've saved my life now. We have to save my world." Captain Hughes gave her a small smile. "We'll do everything we can, Princess. We're not stopping until we make sure Kalen is safe." The Falcon soared through the vastness of space, its engines humming steadily as it sped toward the unknown. Inside the ship, Captain Hughes and his team were busy preparing for what came next. They had rescued Princess Liara, but the mission wasn't over yet. Kellen was still in danger, and the warlord's forces were relentless. The soldiers knew that they had to act quickly, but they also knew that time was running out. "We need to find a way to strike back," Hughes said, his voice filled with determination as he sat at the command station. "We can't keep running forever." The crew gathered around, listening intently. The princess, who had been sitting quietly in the back, stood up and walked toward them. Her face was serious, but there was also a glimmer of hope in her eyes. She had been through so much, yet she knew that she had to stay strong for her people. "I know what we need to do," Liara said softly, drawing the attention of the team. "We need to form an alliance with the other planets. My mother, Queen Alira, has always believed in peace, and I know there are others in the galaxy who will help us. But we need to reach them, and we need to do it now." Captain Hughes looked at her thoughtfully. You're right. If we can gather support from other planets, we'll have a chance to take down the warlord. But how do we reach them? Not exactly in a friendly part of space. Liara nodded. I have a contact on a nearby planet, Valoria. The Valorians are known for their strength and their ability to protect their allies. If we can get there, they might be willing to help us. Sergeant Brooks, who had been silently listening, spoke up. We'll need a plan. Valoria isn't exactly close, and we'll have to get past the warlord's forces. It's not going to be easy. Liara met his gaze with a quiet strength. I know it won't be easy, but we don't have a choice. If we don't act now, Kalen will fall. Captain Hughes took a deep breath and looked around at his team. They were all in this, together, and they had come so far. There was no turning back now. All right, he said, his voice steady. We'll head to Valoria. Prepare for the journey. This is our chance to end this war once and for all. The crew worked quickly, preparing the Falcon for the journey. Ahead, the ship was already damaged from the battle above Kalen, but they had no choice but to push forward. There was no time for repairs. Every minute counted. They knew that the warlord's forces were still searching for them, but they had to move fast if they were going to reach Valoria before it was too late. As the Falcon lifted off, the crew's focus shifted to the task at hand. Liara stood next to Hughes, her eyes fixed on the stars ahead. She had always dreamed of visiting other worlds, of meeting new people, but this was not the journey she had imagined. She had never thought she would be fighting for her life, let alone the future of her planet. But now, with the human soldiers by her side, she felt a sense of hope. She knew that they were her only chance. The journey to Valoria was long, and the Falcon had to be careful not to attract the attention of the warlord's fleet. They moved through uncharted space, using every bit of stealth they had to avoid detection. Hughes and his team were used to danger, but even they knew that this mission was unlike anything they had ever faced before. As they neared Valoria, the tension in the ship was palpable. The soldiers were ready for whatever came next. They had trained for every situation, but nothing could have prepared them for what awaited them on the planet. We're entering Valoria's atmosphere, Lieutenant Diaz said, her voice calm but filled with focus. We should be there in a few minutes. Hughes nodded. Prepare for landing. Stay sharp. The Falcon descended through the atmosphere, and the soldiers couldn't help but look out the windows as the planet came into view. Valoria was beautiful, lush. Green forests, vast oceans, and towering mountains. It was unlike anything they had ever seen. But there was no time to admire the scenery. The warlord's forces could be anywhere. They had to stay focused. The ship touched down on the planet's surface, and the soldiers disembarked quickly. They were met by a group of Valorian warriors, tall and strong, with fierce eyes that seemed to see through them. These were the people that Liara had trusted, and now they were their only hope. One of the Valorian warriors stepped forward, a woman with short silver hair and a stern expression. Princess Liara, she said, her voice deep and powerful. We've been expecting you. Liara nodded, her heart racing. I need your help. The warlord's forces are closing in on Kalen, and we can't fight them alone. We need your strength to defeat them. The Valorian warrior looked at her for a long moment, then turned to Hughes and the others. You've brought your soldiers with you. We'll fight alongside you, but you must prove your strength. The warlord will not go down easily, and neither will we. Captain Hughes stepped forward. We're ready. We'll do whatever it takes to protect Kalen and defeat the warlord. Together we can end this war. The Valorian warrior nodded slowly. Then we shall fight. For Kalen, for freedom. And so, a new alliance was born. The soldiers of Earth and the warriors of Valoria stood together, united in their fight against the warlord and his forces. The battle was not over, but with this new alliance, there was hope. Hope that they could defeat the enemy and bring peace to the galaxy once again, as the soldiers prepared for the final fight. Liara looked at Hughes and the rest of the team. They had come so far, and now, together, they would finish what they had started. The future of Kalen, and perhaps the entire galaxy, depended on them.